when one physician per day is taking their life, this is a public health crisis. And it's really not being treated as one. And COVID has even made that more clear. As physicians were asked to go out, we're not given PPE that they require to do their work to stay safe. It became very clear that we have a huge issue.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Randy Cook. Please remember that our show is made possible by MD Coaches, a company dedicated to putting healthcare professionals back in charge of healthcare delivery by coaching, mentoring, and supporting physicians at all stages of their career. Look for MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Before we get into my interview today, I want to mention one of our sponsors. If you've ever considered a different way of practicing medicine, whether you're burned out, need a change of pace, or just looking to supplement your income, locum tenens just might be the solution for you. If you're not sure where to start, locumstory.com is the place where you can get real, unbiased answers to your questions. Questions like, what exactly is locum tenens? Or more complex concerns like pay ranges, taxes, various specialties, and how locum tenens can work for you. If these are things you'd like to know more about, go to locumstory.com or drpodcastnetwork.com/locumstory and get all the answers. Well, my guest today is a board-certified family physician from Boise, Idaho. She has a really unique approach to practice that includes integration of nutrition, mindfulness, meditation, biodynamic osteopathy, and even yoga. She also has a very intense interest in physician well-being. So, let's hear my conversation with Dr. Deb Roman. And I am delighted to be speaking with Dr. Deborah Roman out in Boise, Idaho. Deb, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to Prescription for Success.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I bet we're going to have a lot of fun. What we're going to do to start is what we always do, and that is begin at the beginning. I'm very interested to know how you got interested in practicing medicine at the start. Where did that come from?
Sure. I was working at a home for children who had been abused, and I was thinking that I was going to study speech therapy. I had gotten this internship for the summer, and it was a really powerful experience. These were children who were really significantly traumatized, and what really impressed me was the physician who took care of them. When he would walk into the room, these children, some of whom would just scream for probably 20, 30 minutes at a time, would just settle in. They would come up to him. They wouldn't always be verbal, but you could tell that they had a relationship that was so nourishing. And I also remember seeing this man, late at night in a kind of a dimly lit room, sitting there just calling family members or looking over charts and just trying to find out ways that he could help these children. And so, one day I just went home and said to my parents, that's it, I'm going to be a doctor.
And you were about what age at that point?
I think I was probably about 18 or 19.
But you were studying zoology at the time. Did you?
Mm-hmm.
So when you started undergraduate school, I gather you didn't have a completely clear plan about where you were going to go, but this experience with the speech therapy class clearly had a big impact on you. Is that the way it went?
If I'm thinking back to it, and it's funny that it's hazy for me, but it may have been the summer before college. And so that's when I switched to a science major. I was actually thinking of being a teacher before that. Yeah, that was a really powerful experience. And I really, to this day, wish I had had the time, or wish I had gone back and told that physician how much he impressed me and what a difference he made in my life in terms of, what I thought was something that was so meaningful
Yeah.
that he was contributing to the world.
I
Mm-hmm.
think we all have some special people like that we would like to
Mm-hmm.
go back and thank for what they did for us. With that starting point, you decided that you were going to go to medical school. And I know that you went to undergraduate school at University of Maryland. Is that the area that you grew up in? Were you in the Northeast?
Yes, I was. I grew up in Maryland, and I went to University of Maryland for 4 years. And then I went to medical school in Missouri.
You're right at the next question. You decided to go to an osteopathic school as opposed to one of the, I hate to use the prejudicial term, more traditional medical schools, more the homeopathic schools, but you picked an osteopathic school. And I'm wondering how that decision came about.
I had a good friend who, as I was contemplating what I was going to do in terms of applying to medical school, brought up this idea of osteopathic school. I really was not aware of the option at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she shared with me how these physicians had been so helpful to her, and that it was a completely different approach. And it really was much more in line with what makes sense to me. Now there's a lot of overlap. So there are physicians out there that are really looking at the whole person and really looking at how the body heals itself, and having, a great deal of respect for that, how we facilitate that. But at the time, these things were very different, these two different schools of medicine.
Right.
The more I explored it, the more I thought, this is really much more in line with who I am and what makes sense to me. Once I started exploring that, I did an interview at some of the MD schools, the allopathic schools. I just really felt like it was much more in line with who I am and what I wanted to do osteopathic work.
So you felt comfortable there from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a wonderful approach to medicine. And the physician who started osteopathic work, Andrew Taylor Still, he had become very disillusioned with medicine at the time. He had lost some children to illness, and he really felt that we were not looking at this from a whole body perspective. We also were not necessarily showing a lot of respect for the body's ability to heal itself. And he was very rigorous, had to be very rigorous once he started with medical schools, very rigorous in terms of his training in anatomy, physiology, and all the sciences. But he always taught this way of looking at it where you wanted to see what was the integration between the different systems and what was the body telling you. And could you use your hands and put them on the patient and get more information?
And your postgraduate training, your internship and your residency, did you do that in a primarily osteopathic hospital or?
No, I did that at Suburban General Hospital in Pennsylvania, and there was osteopathic work being done there. But then once I got into internship and residency, you're so busy with all of the demands there that practicing the hands-on work sometimes takes a slide. And so I had to do a lot of coursework outside of that.
Once you finished your postgraduate training, was that when you moved out to Idaho, or did that come later?
That came later.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished my postgraduate training. I worked for a physician that I knew for about a year, and then I started my own practice. At the time, most of us practiced in the office, and then we would go to the hospital at night and see all of our patients there. Now we have hospitalists, and it's very different. But
Right.
This was the traditional family practice. So I did that for many years. Then I sold my practice to a hospital system. And at the time, I was pregnant with my third child. I decided that I really wanted to spend more time. And I always spent a lot of time with my patients. Generally, unless it was something very routine, generally at least 30 minutes. But I really wanted to take the time to cultivate my hands-on skills. And I also wanted to really give people the time to look at their health. And again, I think I did a lot of that. But when I was working, I worked for a short time for the hospital system and found that my time got, cut down more and more, that I was given to be with people. And that was that business model. So when I went out on my own again, really wanted to give people the time they needed.
Yeah.
It's a different conversation when you're talking about how do you enhance health as opposed to how do you stop disease. And enhancing health takes time. It takes time for me to sit with the patient and ask them, how are you? How are you really? And sometimes the headaches or the belly pain or the resurgence of cancer, they're related to the divorce or the child that has a drug issue or many, many different things, right? And so being able to give people the time to say, how are you? And what are these different issues that are playing into your state of health right now? And then how can I help? How can I facilitate that process with you? So I loved that. That was a great opportunity for me. And I actually wound up, interestingly, I was renting some space in a pharmacy, and they had a room in the back. And I met an Amish woman who lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And she asked if I would start coming there. And so for a couple years, I actually would drive to Lancaster, and a lot of the Amish people in the community would come, and they would come to her basement, and I would treat them and work with them. And it was a really great experience.
That's very impressive that a person from that community saw something in you that appeared that it would fit in their community. Did that ever dawn on you?
Not really until you just said that. You're right. The community itself is very kind of close-knit, and they pretty much a lot of the times keep to themselves. They didn't have a telephone in the house, right? They had a little room outside. The people came to me in their carts. They didn't drive cars. And so I was a stranger, no doubt. And I was someone who was not part of their community. I never felt like an outsider, though. That's so interesting to have you bring that up for me to think about. I really felt very comfortable being with them. I worked in the basement, and there was no lights. There was no electricity, right? So they had this gas lamp that they would put on at night for me. I mean, it was just a whole different world.
I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think I can imagine.
Yeah, it was really cool. And the people were so grateful. When I left and came to Idaho, they created these books for me where everyone would bring pictures of things that they did their own pages for me, and they would either put in articles or names or pictures or comments. It was so wonderful to receive that from them.
I just can't even imagine what it must have been like when you impress people to the point that they want to give more of themselves back to you than just money. That's a very powerful message.
And I would change it to, it's not as much that I impressed them, I don't think. It was that we established a relationship that was
you connected.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That was respectful, that was authentic. And they appreciated it, and I appreciated it. The thing about medicine is that it's bidirectional. The doctors are healed too by having the privilege of working with people and their families for all those years.
I think that is unquestionably the way it should work, or maybe the way it works the best. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit more because of what you're doing right now. Now, I want to get back to the chronology. You made this decision to move to Idaho, and I'm curious about why you picked the Mountain West and what you expected to find and what you expected to accomplish once you got there.
My husband had been out here for many years before coming back east to work for a while and stay with his sister, and he just felt that it was just a wonderful place to be. And so when we started looking at, where do we want to raise our children, he really felt that if I was willing, he would be very grateful if we could be in the Northwest. And I think it really has been a wonderful experience. My children love the outdoors and they love this area. And I do too. I think when you're in a place like Idaho where there's so much wilderness and you can get to the big rivers really quickly, you can get to the big, big mountains. I think for most people, that exposure to nature is nourishing.
So when you got to Boise, was the plan to have a fairly traditional osteopathic type practice, or did you already have that interest in physician well-being, which is where I'm actually trying to take the conversation?
Oh,
I'm really fascinated with that. How do we make that connection?
Yeah. So once I made the decision to really develop my skills in terms of working with the body, hands-on, and also to spend more time with patients, giving often an hour or more, and really have that more global approach to health, I never turned back, because to me, that is really where the magic happens. So my practice was set up similarly. So I didn't go back to a full traditional practice and hospital practice at that point. And so I practiced I continue to practice now in that way. So that's kind of what I did when I came to Idaho. The transition to the work with physicians and other clinicians came when I started to hear students and colleagues tell me how unhappy they were in medicine. And I love practicing medicine. I think it is such a wonderful, wonderful profession. I don't dread going to work. I love going to work. I love working with people. So to hear people say that they really don't want to practice anymore, or that they're so unhappy, so depressed, was really crushing. And so as I started to do more research on it, I started to realize that there was already research being done, and that it was finding that many physicians were experiencing what they would call burnout, which is, it's more of a complex term, but it involves, emotional exhaustion. It involves a sense of depersonalization, where you sort of draw back from your connections with people. It interferes with the sense of meaning that you get from your work. And so I went to different researchers. I actually made a wonderful friend. One of the key researchers in physician burnout is Colin West from the Mayo Clinic. And I had read some of his articles, and I sent him an email and said, could you help me to understand this better? I'd like to see what I can do to help. And he said, just call me. And we wound up having this wonderful 45-minute talk. He shared everything I needed to go read and everything I needed to learn with me. Like, here's where you need to start, Deb. And actually, he wound up being involved in a couple of conferences that we put on. And so we've become very good friends. So once I started to realize that this was such an issue, I went to some of the medical associations, the osteopathic and allopathic ones, and started to ask, can we start doing something about this? Can we start bringing in the information, bringing in the researchers, pulling people together, giving people insight into what is really happening? Because I would offer that, when one physician per day is taking their life, this is a public health crisis, and it's really not being treated as one. And COVID has even made that more clear. As physicians were asked to go out, we're not given PPE that they require to do their work to stay safe. It became very clear that we have a huge issue.
Remember medical school? You were confident, studious, hardworking, and you learned what to expect in all manner of patient care. Then reality struck. Regulations, expenses, staff management, and administration. Is this what we signed up for? Stress on the verge of burnout, no time for family, or the reason we got into medicine. Helping people. What are the options when you're afraid you're in the wrong career? Transition, teach, quit? What if there was another way? MD Coaches can help. We're a team of medical professionals with a century of experience in the clinical and business sides of medicine. More importantly, MD Coaches has been where you are, stressed and trying to navigate a world school didn't prepare us for. MD Coaches is your mentor, your confidant, to help you make your practice shine, navigate administrations, and successfully lead staff and projects. Or if you're ready to transition, we can help there too. MD Coaches is doctors helping doctors. Visit our website to receive a free, no-obligation consultation. Go to mymdcoaches.com/RX. That's mymdcoaches.com/RX. Isn't it time someone else was on your side? Don't let the business of being a doctor stop you from doing what you love. That site again, mymdcoaches.com/RX. Visit us today.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. I continue to be fascinated with your capacity to recognize that something was wrong and that perhaps there was a way to deal with it. And it sounds like you found a very capable individual. I gather that you have continued to stay in fairly close contact with him.
Yeah, I consider Colin to be a friend, and he has come to 3 of the conferences that we've put on and brought very, very valuable information. And what I love about Colin is that he's really one of the foremost researchers in this field, but he is so down to earth. And whenever we do a conference, he's always there to sit and answer questions and talk to people after conference hours are over. He has guided me tremendously. I had never put on a conference. It's kind of the way I made the decision to go to med school, right? Like I came home one day and I said to my family, I'm going to be a doctor now. And my dad and mom are like, well, do you want to think about this a little bit? Maybe you want to like research. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. Well, what if you don't get in? And I'm like, well, then I'll deal with that. And I remember when I started my practice in Pennsylvania, people said the same thing. Well, what if you fail? And I thought, well, it's not that you're going to fail. It's just that I'm going to have to figure out a different path. If that path doesn't work, I'm going to have to figure out another one. But when I went to put on these conferences, that was a big step. And thank goodness Colin was there. He was amazing. He really sat down with me each day and gave me ideas. And Deb, you want to think about this and think about this, and really helped tremendously to make those successful.
Yeah, that really is a big deal, and I think that's probably what your friends were getting at. I mean, I think it's fairly common knowledge that to put on even a small conference is a substantial financial investment. It's a little bit of a risk, and it would be very easy to focus on what disastrous thing might happen, and maybe this is not going to work. And that it sounds to me like that was not an issue for you. If it doesn't work this way, it'll work another way. Is that the way you approached it? Yeah,
I just felt like, okay, let's do this. Let's figure out what we need to do. Oh, we had some hiccups, Randy, the first time. No doubt about it.
I'm sure.
And what I would say to you is that the one thing I've really learned is that when you bring people together, and if we are all inspired by something that we think is important and meaningful, we figure out how to get each other through it. And that's really what happened for each of the conferences. I did show up at the second conference a little more aware of what I was getting myself into. But I remember getting there at like 5 a.m. and bringing all this information. And I'm actually kind of an introvert. So I'm kind of a quiet person. I've learned that about myself. And so putting on a conference is a big step out of my box.
Mm-hmm.
And I got there in the morning. I thought I had everything organized. And all of a sudden I looked around the room and I thought, what have I done? What was I thinking? Why did I think I could do this? And I'm the one that's facilitating it, And I sat for a few minutes and then I thought, I had this amazing young student in college who's now going on to be a medical school student, and other people that had come to help me. I knew all my friends were coming to support this effort. And my children drove in my 2 boys drove all night to get in to support this effort as well. And so we just began. A funny story about that, one of the hiccups there is I was giving a talk on cultivating well-being. And like I said, I'm a bit of an introvert. So doing public speaking and putting on big events, that's definitely a stretch for me. So I have to do a lot of personal work. Like I do a lot of meditation and mindfulness work, and I kind of cultivate my capacity to be in those settings and be calm and really just be myself. But I was looking forward to, having my talk kind of done and under my belt, because I had so much to do with the conference, and I felt like that would give me kind of a sense of, okay, we've got that. So I sit down and I'm ready to, to talk to everyone. I talked probably for, 10 or 15 minutes, and we had it at this beautiful venue with lots of beautiful windows downtown. And all of a sudden, all of the lights in an entire city block went out.
Oh, my goodness.
We had no electricity for anything we were going to do.
So no
and the
lights,
funniest,
no PA,
nothing, right?
no
Nothing. It was like, and so here I am in the middle of this talk that I'm excited to complete, right? And so the funny part about that is my older son, was taking photos for this, and my husband and my middle son and my daughter were sitting on this couch watching, supporting me. And all you saw on their faces was their mouths dropped open, this look of complete shock, like, oh my goodness, look what just happened. But what happened is that my friend Mick, who teaches mindfulness work, jumped up and said, Deb, I can do something in between while you're figuring this out. And everybody kind of just pulled together and said, okay, this is going to make a good story. We don't have a schedule that's going to be, where we thought it was going to be, but we have each other. We can make this work.
Well, it sounds like you were surrounded by people with the right attitude. It's a great story. And as I was listening to you, it made me think, Deb, one of the things that distressed me the most when I started my own practice is the capacity of physicians to fight with one another. Everybody was always sort of protecting their own turf, and you know how it goes.
Sure.
And it sounds to me as if we have moved into an era where we're about to realize that we share more common problems than we think. And in fact, I think one of the more recent things that you have done is to do a program about what are we going to do about prior authorization. I mean, that's something that makes us all suffer.
Right.
And it seems to me that finding these common issues is something that we've really missed for a very long time. Am I close to the right territory or not?
No, I love what you're saying. I think that's a really important piece. what we found with the second conference was that the research was showing that the primary reasons for physician burnout and distress were system level issues that we really needed to address as a community. So when we brought people together, we first spent a day with just the docs, but then we brought in system executives to start having conversations, right? We did a lot of groundwork first, though. There was a lot of meetings for coffee to say, how can we have these conversations without being adversarial? How can we recognize that we're all trying to complete our work in a way that we feel is valuable? And how can we do the best thing we can for the physicians and other clinicians and for the patients? And many people were cautioning me that probably wouldn't work well to bring the system executives in to talk with the docs. But like you're saying, Randy, what are the options? I mean, that's the only way we're going to address it. We have to look at the issues together. And it actually was really very, very successful. People felt successful in the sense that people felt heard. They felt comfortable with each other. They felt like we could start to delve into these issues a little bit more together. I don't know that we had any, big answers that day, but we knew that we had something to talk about together and to work on.
I'm finding this very encouraging, but at the same time, I'm a little bit worried, and I'd like to get your opinion on another issue.
Sure.
At the time that I began my practice, which was about the time they discovered fire, I think.
Likewise, that's why I can't remember any of these dates you keep asking me.
Well, at that time, I started my practice in 1980, and physicians as employees of hospitals or healthcare systems or anything of that nature was practically unheard of.
Exactly.
And as of this year, there are more employed physicians in the U.S. than there are self-employed physicians, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's going to have an adverse effect on the physician's urge to do the right thing for the patient. What do you think? One of my favorite complaints over the last decade or so, when I would see first one physician and then another becoming an employee of a hospital or a healthcare system or whatever, my first retort to that is the instant that the physician works for anyone other than the patient loses. So I'm a little worried about that going forward. And are we going to survive it, or will there be a time when physicians are their own employers and they don't have to feel like they're being pressured to be doing billable hours and billable procedures and things of that nature? What do you think?
I think that's a really important piece. And I think it's leading to a tremendous amount of distress for physicians because they don't feel that they can provide the kind of care that patients deserve.
Right.
Because they're in systems that are dysfunctional. They're often motivated by a bottom line. And this is a service. It's not a commodity. This is something where we are working with people's lives and relationships and billable hours, even, patient reviews. You can do your best work for a patient, as you know, and they may not be happy with you.
Right.
Because they may not want to know that they have cancer. They may be angry about something, or who knows, but it doesn't mean that you didn't offer them your best and give them your best advice and support them. When physicians, their fee schedules are being dictated by patient reviews, it's a dangerous place to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then certainly billable hours, the increase in administrative demands. I think personally, I feel that system is broken. I feel that people are starting to step out of that system again. There's direct primary care where people have a different model where you can once again be with your physician and they can really focus on you They actually negotiate lower rates for labs and for, and I think many physicians that I speak to, I do a lot of work with consulting with physicians about, how do you navigate some of these things and maintain your well-being? For many of them, they have to leave that system. We certainly need to work within the system as best we can to make changes. But personally, I don't feel that the way the system is running right now is consistent with good healthcare, quality healthcare that provides patients what they need. There are pockets, and I know that docs are doing their best to provide the best care they can. But when there's those kinds of limitations, when the lack of autonomy is so great that they can't make decisions about what their patients need, then to your point, how do you provide good care?
Exactly. Well, Deb, I got to tell you, I am encouraged just because of this conversation that there may actually be a turnaround on the horizon, and I think you're going to be one of the notable movers and shakers in that effort, and I'm encouraged.
I appreciate that. It's that's one of the most important things I can hear is that when someone says I'm encouraged. And if I could just tell you briefly another example is that when we went to look at prior authorization, so again, there are times we want to work within the system, of course. I'm not saying that we just, ignore the fact that we can make change. Prior authorization is a huge pain point for clinicians. Physicians spend about 2 days per week on prior authorizations with their clients, and it interferes with the quality of care. It leads to abandonment of care. It's a financial burden. And this was prior to our conference in 2018 when we were going to bring together physicians and executives to discuss how we can work with the system and also create other models that will allow people to practice in a way that's meaningful and beneficial to patients and address this crisis of declining physician well-being. So I sat down with a friend of mine who's actually working now as the CMO for an insurance company. And we talked about, so how do we do this? What are we going to do that will inspire people? And what we talked about was, let's pick something that is an actionable issue that we can work on that has significant impact, and that maybe we can move the needle and show people that if we work together across different disciplines, bringing in, let's say, payers and physicians and administrators, that we can make a difference. So we picked the prior authorization and we started to work. And he brought together a lot of the payers in the state, and I brought together docs, and we were supported by our medical society. And the first meeting was a little bit rocky. I went to the payers and many of them were docs, right? They just had moved into administration. And I said, hey, you guys, how did you feel about that? And they said, Deb, we felt kind of like we were the bad guys. Mm-hmm. So we went back and we talked about that. And in our second meeting, we, like you offered to me today, everybody's on a first name basis. We started to just, let's talk to each other as people. Let's get to know each other as friends and peers and colleagues. And let's find a common goal that we can work on together and treat each other with respect. Always bring food. The pandemic put a real kink in my game there, because I was always bringing really good scones and chocolate, and that always helps. But
I bet.
After a couple meetings, Ed became Ed, not the CMO of an insurance company, right? And Deb was Deb, not a physician who's causing trouble in town, right? And honestly, what's so beautiful is we've made some really good progress, and people have continued to come, and this isn't a paid position, every 2 months for 3 years. We come together every time, and we're really making progress in terms of addressing these issues and getting things done. So I love that you say you're inspired, because I think the piece that can be so dangerous is when we become so disillusioned that we give up.
Yeah, I think you have actually found the secret sauce And I think for a lot of us, it was hard to conceive that some of the bad guys might sit down and actually have a conversation with us. But clearly you have proven that that can actually happen, as improbable as it may seem, and you're having reasonable success with it. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I hope you are too, because
I am.
so I truly am encouraged that you may have found the right recipe. I certainly hope so.
As I think about the world right now and the divisiveness and the issues that we're facing that are so huge, right? I think that my grandpa had it figured out. Like he came here from Russia, and maybe not just him, but his community, and he settled in the U.S. But then he heard that his family was in danger during World War II, and so he went back to help them. But when he got there were all these other people that said, "Please help us too," and he wound up bringing over 100 people across Europe to the U.S. and
Wow.
to safety. Yeah. But what he really taught me by what he did was that he felt this responsibility to his community. He felt that that was really something that you never give up. And that if you can come together with your community, they will help you too. Like together, you will figure out how to do this. He had no idea how he was going to get those people across the borders. He had no idea. It was very unsafe what that was going to look like. But they all worked on it together and they made it happen. And that's inspiring to me. If we just work together on things like the pandemic, whatever issues we're facing, we can do a lot.
Well, I think you've made the very good point that it really does take a village, as they say.
It takes a village.
We need the enthusiasm of the young people and the wisdom of the older people. And yeah, I think there is a lot of possibility there. Mm-hmm. And Deb, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I feel better about our future just because of it. But we've reached a point in the program where I like to get out of the way and give you an opportunity to offer some personal wisdom. So I'm going to close my mic and sit for a few minutes, and Dr. Deborah Roman is going to offer us her prescriptions for success.
So that's a big ask, right? Prescriptions for success. I think, first of all, I would take a look at what is your definition of success. For me, success is having relationships that are based in kindness and respect, and helping each other to navigate circumstances that are difficult, being aware of our own biases, being willing to learn from others about ways to address those biases and expand our perspectives and understand why someone else is feeling the way they are. I would say that the prescriptions for success are to stay true to your values. Do what you feel is important in the world to help others, to decrease the suffering. It may not be easy. You may have to be very creative, and there may be losses to hold true to your values, to what you think is important. But in the end, I would say, one of my teachers says, always preserve the dignity of others. And I would say that's a good one. You know, always make the relationships the centerpiece of everything you're doing. And there's no way it can go wrong, because together you figure it out. And it may not look like you thought it was going to, but it will happen. And I guess as physicians, I would offer one other thought, and that is that we're taught to be pretty self-sufficient and strong. I'm putting that in quotes with my fingers. You can't see me. I think there's great value in learning to share with others what we're feeling as well. To be open about our vulnerabilities, to be open about the things that concern us or that upset us. Allow the community of people that you feel comfortable with to help you move through difficult circumstances.
Deb, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us, and thank you so much for a really fascinating conversation that I think is going to help bring us to a better place for all physicians. I certainly hope so. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find you and reach you and learn more about you, because I bet a lot of people are. So if you'd like to share Twitter handles or email addresses or upcoming seminars that you're going to lead or whatever you like, please let us know right now.
Always feel free to just reach out to me. I'm very accessible. So my website is www.finding and then a dash health.com. And my email is Dr. Deb Roman at finding-health.com. And please feel free anytime to reach out to me. We are working on this compassionate communities movement and always looking for people to help us to enhance the health of our communities. And we're actually hoping to involve people throughout the country. I'd also just love to know what you're doing. So reach out anytime, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, Deb, once again, thank you for being generous enough to be with us here today. And I will mention, for the benefit of our guests, that on that website there is a blog that is just rich with the sorts of thoughts that you've heard today in this interview. So thank you again for being a guest on Prescription for Success. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here, Randy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I do hope you enjoyed my chat today with Dr. Deb Roman. And before we finish up, don't forget to visit locumstory.com or drpodcastnetwork.com/locumstory to get real, unbiased answers to all your locum tenens questions. Thank you again so much for listening today. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and please consider becoming a subscriber. Also, please visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com and share some of the wisdom you've gained over the years on SpeakPipe. Maybe we'll play it in one of our upcoming shows. And as always, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.